Would anybody like to take a guess and tell me where those pictures are from? It's not a rhetorical question, I'm looking for answers.
Guantanamo Bay?
No, close, kind of.
Private prisons?
Yeah, you heard my topic, so yep. So those pictures are from a private prison in Mississippi. This prison was run by the GEO Group, one of the largest private prison companies in the country. And those photos were used in a lawsuit against that prison as evidence that it violated human rights. And in that same lawsuit, a federal judge who saw those photos and went to personally investigate that prison described his harrowing glimpse into that prison as it painted a picture of such horror as should be unrealized anywhere in the civilized world. I wish I could say that that was a unique experience. That was a one-off event. Unfortunately, it is not. Across the country, private prisons routinely sacrifice the security of the public, the safety of both prisoners and guards, and humane imprisonment. And they do this in the name of profit. Let's tackle the inhumane imprisonment aspect of it. In a report by the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, they found that inmates in a private prison in Mississippi lost from 10 to 30 pounds in just a few months of incarceration. A medical expert who works for the ACLU did some tests and investigated the prison, and he concluded that this weight loss was due to malnutrition. Some of these prisoners who were mentally ill were not being fed enough. And in a private prison in Arizona, which held people detained by the Border Patrol, they had 5 suicides in 12 years. That might not sound like a lot, but other comparable prisons across the country and in that state had no more than one in that same 12-year span. Not only are they inhumane, they are a security risk to the public. In 2010, a private prison in Kingsman, Arizona, had 3 inmates escape. And when they escaped, they killed 2 tourists and burned them in their camper. When state investigators went to investigate, they found that the perimeter of the prison was left unmonitored for 15 minutes at the start of each shift. And camera records show that at the time of escape, there was only 1 guard watching the perimeter. Their investigation also found that 2/3 of the staff had less than 3 months on the job, and that the prison offered no training programs. The Department of Justice has found that private prisons have 49% more assaults than public ones. Assaults from inmates on officers. And they have 65% more assaults from inmates on inmates. So, they sacrifice a lot, all in the name of profit, which leads us to our cause, money. They do this because it saves them money. And I'm gonna throw my opposers here a bone. Yes, private prisons have saved us money, sometimes. It's still up in debate, but for the sake of argument, let's say that they save us money. Let's take a look at what that money saving gets us. So I want you to pay attention to the time step at the bottom, because we're going to skip around a little bit, because I don't want to watch the whole video. So we're going to jump, so you can see up in this corner, an inmate is being beaten. The time is currently 6:25. This goes on for about 30 minutes. 6:53 is when guards finally arrive. So that is what the money gets us, the money saving gets us. Guards who don't show up for 30 minutes as a prisoner is being brutally assaulted. And that data is skewed about them saving money because private prisons can often choose inmates. They can reject certain inmates, they can accept certain inmates. So often what they do is they accept mostly non-violent drug offenders. A study found that private prisons across the country were made up of 28% of nonviolent drug offenders, compared to 14% of all the public prisons. So they save us money, true, perhaps, but they do so at the cost of justice. So private prisons, as I said earlier, are motivated by money. And they are paid based on the number of prisoners they have and for how long they hold them. That already should be setting red flags off in everybody's head. They have an incentive to keep prisoners there for longer. And a study done by Professor Anita Mukherjee from the Wisconsin School of Business found that private prisons handle infractions at 15% the rate of public ones. For those that don't know, infractions, the amount of infractions that parole boards look at when determining whether or not a prisoner should be released. So that study concluded that due to that infraction increase, inmates were held 4 to 7% longer at private prisons than public ones. And due to lobbying and contracts that the states have to sign and the federal government have to sign with these prisons, sometimes they are required to keep the prisons at almost 95% capacity. They are required to keep people incarcerated. The states are. And if they don't, they are hit with fines. Arizona attempted to reduce the number of prisoners in a private prison. When they did so, they violated their contract with the group they were contracting. This resulted in a $3 million fine to the state of Arizona. The obvious solution is to just ban private prisons. Unfortunately, the problem runs a little deeper than that. But let's take a look at the obvious first. It was in place that the federal government was going to phase out the use of private prisons during the Obama administration. Unfortunately, Trump has reversed that decision, that policy, and he actually increased the use of public prisons, or private prisons, along the southern border to house mostly illegal aliens. During his administration, private prison stock increased by over 100%. Now, Biden has made claim that he will reduce private prison use as well, but we will wait to see if that's true. But private prisons are only the fruit of the tree. The problem is that we incarcerate way too many people. And it all started with Ronald Reagan's war on drugs. In the 1980s, Ronald Reagan started the war on drugs, which aimed to target, well, they say drug users, but it was really a way to target black people and war protesters. So, this war on drugs and tough on crime mentality leads us to incarcerating people for times that are grossly unproportionate to the severity of the crime that they committed. All this, and so we did not have enough room in our public prisons. We had to turn to the private sector. And conveniently, not coincidentally, that is when the private prisons start to increase on the graph. This leads us today where America has 4.4% of the world's population, but we hold 25% of the world's prisoners. If we truly want to solve this issue, we need to stop focusing on punishment and start focusing on rehabilitation. Locking people away for longer and longer periods of time doesn't fix anything. Let's take a turn and look at Sweden, for example. They are renowned for their humane treatment of their prisoners. They treat them humanely and they let them live semi-natural lives while in prison. By doing so, they prepare them for the return to society. And the result of this is they have a reoffending rate of only 29%. Maybe that sounds like a lot, but the US has a reoffending rate of over 70. So, 70% of people who leave our jail system and our prison system will eventually find their way back there. So, as I stated before, private prisons are not the only parasite on our American justice system. Far from it. We could address the fact that prisons use labor, both public and private prisons, use prison labor, where inmates work for as little as 12 cents an hour. We can address the fact that you can get away with raping an unconscious girl behind a dumpster, provided you're rich and white. So perhaps there are bigger fish to fry. But I want you to think back to those pictures of the charred cell, because inmates had to start their cell afire because that was the only way to get the guards' attention and save them from beatings or medical mishaps. Think to the bloody floor where an inmate was beaten senseless. Think to the video where it took 30 minutes for guards at a private prison to come save an inmate. Think back to those images and ask yourself, is this justice? Thank you.
Great job. Riley, we're gonna open it up for just a little Q&A, so if anyone has a question for Riley, this is your time.
Have you ever heard of the story of Freeway Ricky Ross?
No, I don't believe I have.
Okay. He's just probably the most successful drug dealer in terms of profit in American history. And he makes claims about receiving like cocaine from government agents during the Reagan administration.
Yes, I've heard that Reagan, they funneled drugs into communities to arrest them because, well, actually there's a quote from Reagan's, forgot what it was, like senior chief or something, but he was quoted as saying that they knew they couldn't make it illegal to be black or anti-war, but by targeting the drugs that were quote unquote associated with those communities, such as like namely marijuana and I believe crack, maybe cocaine, one of the two, they could arrest those people and then effectively sway the political like system in their favor.
Did you come across anything in your research that showed why states such as Arizona or other states are going the private route? Is it more affordable? What is it?
Well, it is. So here's the thing: to build public prisons, you need to go through a lot of like jumps. Public prison used to be funded by like you had to get like a committee to sign on, and you had to get like the community to sign on, and a lot of people, what they found in the study is that a lot of people are for like the tough on crime mentality in the polls. Like people will say, oh, I'll support a public prison if you build one, but when it comes to actually funding those projects, they kind of back off and say, I'd rather have a school or some better roads. So they had to turn to the private sector, and especially in the southern states. I actually have a map here that show. So in the southern states, it's a little more concentrated. You can see like Texas, Arizona. They have some up there and a little bit in Florida and those kind of other southern states, but it's more concentrated along the border, mainly for the immigration control, the illegal aliens. So that's technically more why the public prison or the southern states build private prisons.
Good. All right.
Who decides, like, if you go to a private prison or not? So, like, when you are said, like, hey, you're going to prison, do they give you choice?
It kind of depends on the contract that the private prisons sign with the state. Some contracts allow the private prison to say, yeah, we'll take this guy, or no, we won't take this guy. Some private prisons don't have a choice, so it's kind of just chosen at random based on like availability, beds, that kind of thing. But sometimes private prisons can deny inmates, and then they do so with expensive inmates usually. So, you know, like I said earlier, they take drug offenders, nonviolent drug offenders, at like almost twice the rate that public prisons do.
All right. Well done, Riley. Great job. Okay. Oh, you're up.
Oh, do you want me to leave this clicker up here for you?
Yeah, wait, I like that.
Yeah.